My name is Maria, and welcome to Botkube's new Teams integration webinar. Today, I'll just be showing you about the new Botkube Teams app and why we did it, and I'll be showing you a quick demo. But just in case you're new here, Botkube is a Kubernetes troubleshooting and monitoring tool that allows you to not only receive notifications, but also act on them in any of these following communication platforms. So we work with Microsoft Teams, Slack, Discord, and Mattermost, and it really enables developers and DevOps teams to move efficiently and quickly in this new remote and hybrid work environment. So today I'll just be showing you a little bit about the Botkube Microsoft Teams app, and I will be starting with a dashboard. So you can get to the dashboard by going to getting started. I'm already signed in. And I already have my cluster connected, but it's very easy to get started. And I have a video about that. You can check it out in the link below, the link in the description below. So my Microsoft Teams demo app is connected to this mock Teams channel. So here I have the example of having just a general channel where all the Kubernetes notifications will come in. Then I have a backend channel. So this will be more for, your DevOps team, your platform engineering team. And this will have the Helm plugin connected and Kubernetes as well, and kube control as in addition. And then the front end will have the kube control and the Doctor plugin, which is our ChatGPT plugin. And the backend channel also has the ChatGPT plugin. So I'll just be showing you what that looks like. And just with the dashboard, you can easily configure the different channels that you're connected to. You can configure different settings. So for example, if I wanted to change the permissions in Helm, I can do that. I can make it read-write, or I can make it read-only. And I can do it via YAML or through these buttons. I prefer the buttons. So let me just quickly walk you through what this looks like in Teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ping my cluster. And I'm just going to do the help command so we can see all of the available commands. So here are the following commands we can do. So if we want, let's just list out all of the executors that are available. And one thing I really like about the Teams app is that these buttons make it very interactive. So in this channel, we have kube control, like I said before. And if I were to run this same thing in this backend channel, we'd get more. We'd get more of the executor that we installed. Great. So we can see Helm and kube control. So this is great for managing your team's infrastructure because not all teams need all the information. So it's great to separate things by channel, and you can make private channels as well, or you can open up a particular channel for a support case, which is really great because with these large enterprise teams, security and managing multiple people is very important. So next, I'm just going to run a few commands. So just do a kubectl get pods, just so I know what's going on my cluster. All right, so I just have 2 pods up there. I have a sample one, and I have a failing one that has a crash back loop. So I get to see all the status of my cluster in this table format. And if we go back to the dashboard, I can go to these audit logs and then just see everything I've done in the last few minutes. So I can see all of the commands that I just ran, and I can see who did what, which is great for managing your team, performance, and just back to that security piece of making sure the right people have the right information. And let me have a alert pop up so we can see what that looks like live. Great. So we have this alert coming in. So it shows, and this alert pops up in the general channel, backend channel, so everybody sees what's going on. So then we have a volume claims error. So what we can do now is we can just describe it. And we can see more inside of what's going on here. And if you notice in this general channel, you're not able to run never mind, you can do that. So if I were to go back and add a plugin, so let me do that really quickly. So I'm going to add in the doctor plugin. And then I'm going to quickly cut away so you don't see my API key, which I've definitely done before. And now we're going to save changes, and it's going to update quickly. And then we should be able to see an update in our Teams app. We're going to play around with the ChatGPT plugin, so we can say, what is a persistent volume claims error? So let's say you're just a developer and you get this alert coming up. You can just do everything right in your communication channel, which is great because a lot of times when people have questions, they have all similar questions. So then I get the answer right here. And then if we want, we can play around with Helm too and see that in this channel list-a. So I'm getting some more alerts coming up. So a lot of engineering Great. So I can run this home status. I can see what's going on. If I go back to my front end channel, notice that nothing happened while we were playing around with Helm because it's only connected to that back end channel. So if we go back to our dashboard again, let's refresh. And we can go back to our audit logs. And we can see everything that was done, and we can see what channel everything was done and by whom. See that was our demo. You can get started with Microsoft Teams. You can click the link below. We have the tutorial, and a lot of engineering effort went behind this new app, and I will show you a clip of one of our lead engineers, Mateusz, talking about the engineering process behind the Microsoft Teams app.
What is different in Botkube when I joined Botkube is that at the beginning I was also joining a project that was more about notifications, where after a few months of feedback we turned it into more like a bidirectional form, where like with this interactivity, so more option to not only get a notification but to already get a context of it. Before that's more about initial use case theme that we had for Botkube, that actually previously we had to go back to our, like we always had to have our laptops. For example, when I was on call, that was quite strange that even if you go to a gallery, whatever, you always had a backpack with your laptop, because that was the most convenient way to check what's happening, whether how urgent it is.
So what got you guys started on working on this huge project? I know you guys had Microsoft Teams support, so what makes it different? And just can you tell us a little bit about like the ideation process all the way to the final product today?
Okay. When we actually took over Botkube, there was already plenty of integrations, and one of them was Microsoft Teams. And there were a few problems, because for those who started with Botkube, the most convenient way was to start with Slack. And the problem is that it's not always an option. Maybe for some evaluation of POC, that's great, but you still want to have Teams integration on the line. And there were a few, I would even call them critical problems. Because first of all, when you are starting with Teams, you had to create from scratch application, which is for Teams. They have a lot of different terms. So you need to, at the beginning, specialize in a Teams integration. Of course, we provided you with a step-by-step instruction, but they were quite long, because in the Teams system, you provide first the application, and in this application, you define the bot functionality. This is one of the features that you can provide, because Teams are a bit different from Slack. And for Teams, you can, for example, provide also a meeting extension, which is also a nice idea that probably will follow in the future. But right now, when you focus on bot integration, which is just by typing, getting notifications, that's the first functionality that you need to configure. And the most problematic part is that you need to do it for each clusters. If you have 10 clusters, then you do it 10 times. And that's the first problem that we noticed. Another problem, which could be also hard for someone to create, is requirement that your cluster will actually have a public endpoint. Problems with it is that when you have a company that want to start some experiment, run some POCs, then you would need to do at the beginning is to expose a public endpoint from your cluster. For some of them, it's a security risk, because you need to make sure that it won't affect, and you will not, for example, expose any private informations. Plus, you also need to make sure that all certificates, all the stuffs are in place. So if you don't have Cert Manager, for example, another component to maintain. And so with those steps, you're already lacking easy install, multi-cluster support. And another problem is that we, at the beginning, because there was the most, the biggest user base was related to Slack. So at the beginning, we introduced a really nice feature. We get a lot of positive feedback about interactivity. So instead of typing, you are able to use buttons, drop downs, all those stuffs. They are really handy when it comes to working with events, because with a single button click, even on your phone, you can get event details in the context of a given notification. That's great. Microsoft, it was lacking this one. So there was like, at least those problems were hard to jump for initial users. For those who really wanted to have it, those integration, for sure they could invest even a day to come up with this integration. And to make this easier, when it comes to our perspective, what we did, we divided this initial MVP version of Microsoft integration into all those parts that I mentioned. So how to simplify installation, how to get rid of ingress on your cluster, how to add interactivity support. So with that, we started a few POCs inside our team to find out what we can do for our users. Turns out that when it comes to installation, it could be connected with the ingress itself, because it's a bit different in each platform as we support. But when it comes to Teams, basically for Teams, it's required. We are not able to change it. So what we had to do is to implement our own, some sort of gateway that is able to translate those HTTP traffic into something that doesn't require public endpoints. We go with gRPC connection. So that's really nice. And because of that, we are also able to have this public endpoint that is sitting on our infrastructure that we take care of. And as a result, we also simplified installation, because right now you don't need to create your application plus bot functionality from scratch, defining also your public endpoints, because this endpoint is always the same for all the installations. So you just have our application that you just install in your workspaces. Now, only for now, you need to actually upload this application to your organization. So instead of going through the whole setup, it's just a matter of uploading a zip file into your Teams. We are planning to be in the official Microsoft Outlook application. That will take a bit of time because we need to also comply with a few guidelines there. We are already supporting that, but we need to also go through the submission process. So this will be even simplified just for one click instead of uploading a zip file. So at this time, we simplified two things: get rid of public endpoint, simplify the installation. So that's great because you don't need to take care of that. And we are just using gRPC connection between your cluster and our infrastructure, meaning that it also works for private clusters. So that's great. You don't need to expose anything. And the last part was, maybe not the last part, but one of the important part was to have this interactivity support. So people tend to say, like, Kubernetes is useful because it provides you with vendor agnostic approach. So it's the same for Botkube, I would say, because it provides you with a communication platform. It's communication platform agnostic, and you don't care whether you will start your POC with Slack for some initial testing, or Discord, or Microsoft Teams, or Mattermost. All of them are interchangeable, so between each other. So you can change them. You can have multiple of them working together. So this requires the backend to have a special logic that, when you have a plugin, Kubernetes notification, for example, we need to translate them into different formats to be compliant with Slack best practices, Teams best practices, because we want to display them in the user-friendly form. This requires us to have some sort of abstraction over all those platforms. We provide some primitives, but we also wanted to have it as, let's say, simple as possible, while providing also support for this interactivity. So for Teams, what we had to do is to come up with a renderer that actually takes this abstract models and convert them into Teams native form. This was a bit not hard but challenging, because for the first implementation we were also only supporting Slack. So that was the first time when we wanted to try out whether our abstraction layer actually works properly across different platforms. So whether the input definitions, fields, dropdowns, etc., are properly abstracted so we are able to actually convert them into Microsoft native forms. It turns out that it was really nice because we didn't have to introduce any breaking changes. Basically, we took this schema, converted that into Teams. They actually using adaptive cards, which are really nice, but some flows are different when it comes to Slack. So Slacks have a different functionality, like you are able to, on the general channels, display a message only to a given user, right? So that's great because, you have 100 people on a given channel. You are asking about to get kubectl builder, instead, getting the same builder for the user on the whole channels. It is displayed only to you. So when you are clicking through it, it's only your state. No one can, break this flow. With Teams, what we know, it's not that easy to be implemented. Actually, for now, there is no such functionality. We can, of course, work around this, and that will be also possible. But for now, we try to keep it a bit simpler. So, for example, kubectl builder is still something that will be there in the future. But instead, we also have all the buttons working, drop-downs, updating messages, which is, for example, interesting. Slack doesn't have such functionality, but Teams have a functionality that when you post a card on Teams, then it could be always refreshed. So when you see it after 5 minutes, we will be able to actually always present you with a fresh view of this card. That's quite unique. For Slack, actually, we don't have this. So you just need to click a refresh button to get to see a fresh card view. However, this is also a beauty of those platforms, that you are trying to make sure that we follow best practices described by all those platforms. So for each of them, we need to have actually unique solutions for all the user flows. So they are not always one-to-one, but I think that's also okay, because each platform provides you with different views, different options. And that's the reason why we also need to write it from scratch, even though we have this abstract model that defines the message. But yeah, as mentioned, this is also done. So right now, if you will see Kubernetes notifications, you can do the same as you have on Slack, get more details, get logs in the context of a given pod error. So that's already there. And for sure, we'll be working on other native support. Like, that's a quite crazy idea about having that meeting extension that I talked about at the beginning. So probably it will be also something on the horizon.
Great. And compared to a lot of other monitoring tools on the market, I don't really hear people talking about integrating with Teams. Why do you think Teams is such a underserved market, despite most companies in this remote world using Teams?
Yeah, I also saw that. So that's let's say maybe not a strange thing, but at the same time, it may be because those communication platforms. So imagine that I saw that there is Microsoft integration when it comes to Argo, when it comes to Prometheus. So the product itself that serves some business logics, they have it. They have some basic functionality only about getting notifications without buttons, for example, right? We are talking about other notification projects, solutions that actually try to collect different projects together to unify that approach and to actually send some notifications. So what I suspect is that it's harder. It's for sure harder to have a product that tries to not only, because at the same time you are trying to create a product that does two things at the same time. So not only tries to unify different CNCF projects, for example, trying to make it easier to configure, but at the same time trying to actually be on all most popular platforms, communication platforms that are out there. So I would suspect that that's the main problem, that they would like to start with a first problem, solve it, and then go to another one. Maybe that's the main reason, because there is no, for example, when it comes to our product, that's always, some sort of challenge, right? To tell whether how far we should go with a given functionality, whether it should be only in Slack or from day one it should be supported across all communication platforms. So I think that we have this unique approach where we are trying to support the minimal functionality all the time across all communication platforms to get you this, to feel that you are independent from a given communication platform if necessary. But at the same time, we are trying to experiment and show that Kubernetes, interacting with Kubernetes could be as nice as possible on different communication platforms. And we prove it already with Teams, right? We started with Slack. That was on purpose. That was only there. We checked that it actually solves real problems for our end users, because you have this simplified Kubernetes experience. You don't need to be Kubernetes expert. So why we shouldn't support that for Teams, right? And with Teams, I think we can go even further with this simplicity, because Teams gives us more power to have more native support. So displaying these Kubernetes details in a nicer form directly in your communication platform. So I hope that this will also help those that have the Microsoft ecosystem. They are working on Azure. They will also see the value on those this functionality, right? So
can you talk a little bit more about that Microsoft ecosystem?
Sorry?
Can you talk a little bit more about that Microsoft ecosystem?
Yeah, that's actually also a nice functionality. So right now, when you and maybe to tell it, tries to be independent when it comes to Kubernetes distro, right? So it doesn't matter whether you are using GKE or EKS or even Minikube K3D for experiments. However, when you are ready, your company is already in Microsoft ecosystem, so you are using Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes, then using Teams integration may feel much easier than having Slack, because again, you may use Slack, but it will mean that you need to support to a bit different ecosystems. So look and feel is different and working with it is different. So when it comes to Teams, it's not there yet, but one company actually is what we are working with is also interested into having something you don't have yet. So imagine that you have a ecosystem fully on Microsoft and you are actually having your clusters there, then probably you are also using it, the same actually Microsoft functionality to authorize with this cluster. So in the same way, without any further configuration, while you will be using Teams integration with Botkube, all those permissions will be already available there. So if you have a proper configuration on Microsoft side, then we'll be able to actually take this by integrating with Teams platform and properly impersonate each user in our engine. That's a huge opportunity, because right now we support Airbag, we support all different scenarios, but they are mostly about abstracting what you need to later configure. So you need to manually configure Airbag and then tell us whether it will be a static one or whether it will take a channel name, right? With Teams, there is opportunity to just get your identity, like as a user that is signing into Teams, and automatically we'll be able to interact with the clusters that you have access to. So this way will simplify for all the administrators or DevOps teams to have in a single place, single source of truth for all the developers that have access to the clusters. So you as a developer, you won't be able to break anything because you will have your permissions already in the context of Botkube. So that could be a benefit of using Botkube, not with Slack, but using it with Teams and your EKS ecosystem.
Great.
That's one of the options. For sure, there are others that we may experiment with.
Thank you so much for watching this webinar. I hope you enjoy Botkube and the new Microsoft Teams app, and I'll see you soon.